Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Happy Safety Week. Today's guest speaker, he is NASA Safety Center's Chief Engineer, and we have Mark Kowaleski with us today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you haven't signed in yet, please do so. And in the meantime, please welcome Mark Kowaleski.
Hey folks, how's everybody doing? Boy, small crowd here, huh? Must be the weather. Certainly not me, I hope, right? I'm Mark Kowaleski. I'm the Chief Engineer up at the NASA Safety Center, and today I'm going to give you a little overview of the NASA Safety Center, maybe talk a little bit about some of the safety statistics that we see with regard to Goddard, and I'm going to thread some personal stories of things that have happened to me just to kind of make it real. And I was talking with an old buddy of mine, and I'm in my 50s, well into my 50s now, and we said, boy, we're getting older now. We got stories to tell, So it's kind of surreal looking back at it and saying, wow, that actually happened to me. So you'll see some stories here that I hope resonate with everybody. And then I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some ideas for total worker health and how we can get to an injury incident-free workplace. So here we go. Let's see. First question is, what's up in Cleveland? And for you sports enthusiasts, right, we've got the Browns, and I'm not going to talk about the Browns, right, because they've got the worst NFL track record in history, I believe. I think the probability of them winning a game is like 0.5%. It's very bad team at this point. So we're not going to talk about that. We also got the Indians, and I think we held our own against the Cubs back in 2016 with the World Series. So I think we were close, but we didn't quite get there. And then we've also got the Cavs. So we got LeBron James. I think he got tired of Florida. He came back, and we brought the NBA championship back in 2016. So, but that's not what's important. You guys know what's up in Cleveland that's really important, relevant to NASA? Got the NASA Safety Center, right? So we are outside of the back gate of the Glenn Research Center, and we're located in a really cool building called the Ohio Aerospace Institute, and it's an all-glass building, very, very funky looking, very modern. And we've been in business since 2007, and we were kind of motivated into existence by the Columbia accident investigation, and also to parallel some of the safety aspects that the NASA Engineering and Safety Center does, which is down at Langley. Speaking of sports, I guess I've got a little funny video here. And related to total worker health and fatigue specifically, and distractions and things like that, I thought this was relevant. So hope you find this humorous. It's a little light shot at safety.
There we go.
So there you go. I think this kind of situation plays out a lot in everyday life, right? Certainly on the front end, you see the worker, and he's obviously fatigued, obviously distracted. He's not focusing on what he's got to do. And I could really resonate with the homeowner, right? So what did he do? He took the nail gun and he held his hand behind where he was going to nail, right? So of course the nail's going to go right through his hand, and then when it wasn't working, he looked down the barrel of it, right? And then he finally picked up the instruction manual after he did all that. So just everything's kind of backwards about this. But these kind of things resonate, I think, in real life with many of us, both in the workplace and because most of us live in homes and we have lives outside of work. The NASA Safety Center is in the business of preventing mishaps, and we do that by promoting training, by sharing knowledge, by ensuring compliance through our audits programs, and by investigating mishaps. That's kind of the four camps that we're in. And a lot of what we do through a variety of campaigns. We do slips, trips, and falls, and eye safety, and ladder safety, and those types of things. In fact, my buddy Mike is staffing the NSC booth outside there, and he's got some examples of some of these types of campaigns that we do. And I think the last I checked, we've done about 80 campaigns in the years, in the 11 or 12 years that the NSC has been in business. So, you know, electrical safety for dummies, those kinds of things. In fact, what was interesting is when I was sitting outside, Mike had gone to lunch and I was sitting off to the side, a visitor had come in, and the lady walked in and she picked up this brochure, this electrical safety for Smarties, right? And she commented to her husband, and she was talking about her son, and he says, "Oh, Billy could use this at home because he's always messing around with the wires and he really doesn't know what he's doing." So I thought it was just kind of neat to kind of see that whole idea of kind of taking that kind of stuff home with you and learning from it. So this is the NASA Safety Center org chart. There's yours truly up there. I'm the chief engineer. Our director is Alan Phillips, and he's been the first and standing NSC director since we were formed. He was a SMA director down at Langley. We have a really good team up here, and that's maybe not the most interesting part, is that we have 3 folks, myself included, that actually started here at Goddard. In fact, I spent about 5 years in building 14 over here in the flight ops area. I had an office over in 12, and actually this guy here, Lee Gatto, him and I shared an office right down here, down the hall in this building, which is kind of neat. So here I am 30 years later, and I'm back. So it's kind of cool, you know. But you know, the Safety Center, it's a good opportunity for folks to expand their horizons, get a little bit of agency exposure. You know, a lot of good things come out of that. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the offices, and I'm going to thread through some of these like life stories that I've had. So first of all, Technical Excellence is about being a learning organization. And this is me back in 1967. I was 2 years old, a little German boy. And what occurred to me is that everything that we know, we have to learn. All right? There's nothing that comes naturally to anybody. So, you know, we have to learn how to not only do technical things, but we also have to learn about the non-technical things, especially those related to total worker health, things like fatigue, things like about getting a good night's sleep, things about getting your blood pressure checked, all those kinds of things that we hear about. Those are kind of learned behaviors and attitudes that we have. So back in 1967, I was learning how to walk and talk. Well, NASA was also learning some pretty hard lessons with the Apollo 1 fire. And the things that stood out to me with the Apollo program, and the Apollo program really is the basis, really was the starting point for the safety programs at NASA. That was kind of the incident that put us over the top. And you know, there's 2 things that came out of that accident. One was that reliability and safety are not the same thing. And by that I mean, when you look at some of the lessons, the hatch was designed to open inward. So from a reliability perspective, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you want to pressurize the cabin, you want to have a good seal. But of course, if you have a fire, and then you have a lot of high pressure, you can't open up the capsule, and that's exactly what happened here with these folks. Another example that we learned was that a pure oxygen environment is not a really good idea for a crewed capsule. And so if you're pushing the reliability and trying to get the alertness and the awareness out of the crew and maximize their time on orbit, well, that oxygen's the answer. But if you're trying to avoid fires, then oxygen is not such a good idea. So the SMA, the Technical Excellence Office at the NASA Safety Center is all about promoting learning. And we do that through our SMA Technical Excellence program. We call that STEP. That's our agency-wide training program for SMA practitioners and engineering and program folks as well. And just some quick stats on that. In the 10 years that we've been up and running, we've put together some 3,500 hours worth of training and I don't know, I think there's like 350 different courses, everything from system safety to reliability, quality, and it's all in Saturn. Anyone can take it any time, so it's a huge resource. And what's really cool about it too is that we provide for all of the training that the NSC puts out, we're ABET accredited, and so if you've got a certification like a PE or a CSP or something like that, you can go online in Saturn and take any of these courses and you'll get credit for your continuing education. Now, we do other things. We run a cohort. That's an annual program to get folks through one of the levels in the STEP curriculum. We also do the the Executive Safety Leadership Program. So Administrator Bolden a few years ago had asked, based on his military experience, to basically train all the SESers across NASA. And we've got about 400 of them. And we've put about half of them through this program at this point to give them kind of that leadership overview of safety and safety practices. And that's been very successful for us. So we're kind of approaching things from all different angles, right? And training our employees and training our executives, and hopefully those two worlds meet in a very productive and safeful way. Then we also run a CSO summit where our chief safety officers get together annually, and they talk about and share stories about safety and reliability and things like that, on-flight programs. Here's an example of, this is what we call our Hall of Fame. You can go to our website and see this. So in the last 10 years, we've had folks that have gone through our SMA Tech Excellence program, and they've qualified at level 4, which is quite a bit of work, level 3. And then we've got several hundred that have qualified at level 2, and we've also got several thousand agency-wide that have qualified at level 1. So very productive campaign for us. And then here's an example of one of our guest lecturers. This is former Administrator Mike Griffin, and he came out and spoke to us about an aeronautic safety topic a while back. And if you're interested in any of these, we've got there must be about 50 guest lectures at this point that we've had. We've had some pretty interesting folks like Henry Petrosky, who's pretty serious in the safety business. We had the safety director for Disney theme parks come out and talk about Disney theme park safety on their rides and public safety and things like that. Very interesting stuff and just a good opportunity to learn. These are some of the STEP training hours that are completed by level. And what's interesting about this is that I should have put a trend line in here, but when you add all these up, these are all the different levels. When you add them up, they have a positive slope and they're going up, which is a great thing, which really shows that Goddard is a learning environment. And what's interesting to us too is that we can correlate it with our campaign. So this line here represents when we rolled out our STEP Level 1 curriculum, and we had the entire SMA community and then a lot of folks from engineering also take a lot of these courses. So just in that year alone, we ramped up almost 3,000 hours worth of training just in that particular curriculum. And then the level 2, which is green, we ran a cohort in 2016 and 2017, and so you can see the effect of that by putting folks through that program, we were able to really crank up the number of training hours that were consumed out here at Goddard. Now, knowledge enables wisdom. This is one of those life stories. So. A number of years ago, my daughter, who was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years old at the time, and we were having a birthday party, and we had a bunch of girls at the house, and we were taking them out to a movie. So my wife and I, we needed 2 cars, and very typical situation that you have in a home environment. I'm driving the red car, my wife is driving the pink car. And my daughter suddenly gets out, she forgets something, and she exits my car, and then runs behind me, and then runs behind my wife's car. So in that instant, I looked over and I saw my wife, and she's putting the car in reverse. She started backing out. So I laid on the horn, and she stopped. She hit my daughter, but she stopped in time. My daughter didn't get hurt. And I say this is a wisdom exercise because there's a few things that happened here when we kind of did the post-incident analysis on this. One was that my wife relies on the backup camera, and of course there's that blind spot on both sides, right? So kind of a classic example of where we should be using our technology to augment our safety and not necessarily replace it. You can't beat having eyes on the target. The other thing is normalization of deviance, which you may have heard. So, we've been backing out of this garage for 10 years, and what happens? Everybody here have parking sensors on their car, right? A lot of folks. So what happens when you're backing up? When you're in a tight space like that every day, the proximity sensor goes off because you're backing out of your garage. So you got the corner of the garage, you got the other vehicle, and what do? You ignore it, right? So that's normalization of deviance. And so my wife and I both got caught up in this, just put in reverse, look at the camera, the alarms are going off, we don't need to worry about it, right? Well, this is a situation where, all the things kind of aligned incorrectly, and this could have been a very, very bad day for us. So needless to say, this was a close call that could have been a death or an injury for our daughter. The other interesting thing about this is a national phenomena. There's about 150 children die every year in exactly this type of scenario nationwide. So I use that as a little wisdom exercise because, you know, I knew better, but I'm a safety professional. I do this every day, but I didn't know better for some reason, all right? So these things actually happen. So this is where our knowledge management group comes in. And in the interest of promoting wisdom, and let me kind of clarify that. When I think about wisdom, I think it's learning without actually having to go through the experience, right? So in this case, I should have known better. I should have known that this was a phenomena. I've seen it before, but for whatever reason, it just didn't kind of click. So our knowledge management group, we run all of our the NSC and the OSMA websites for the agency. We are part of headquarters, OSMA. We run all of our case studies and our safety campaigns. We run a Safety and Health Learning Alliance. We put out safety messages on a periodic basis. And one example that I did, I thought, oh, in the interest of total worker health, which is the theme for this week, is I went to our website and I just searched on total worker health. And of course, you know, we got a bunch of hits here. This is a subset of them. And then when you open up some of these, what we found is just back in December, we had an agency safety message that all of the leadership gets together. This is center directors, associate administrators, and so on. This was one of the topics, was total worker health. And then another example is that we did was, and I pulled this one because it's local to the DC area, is that we did a case study with the DC Metropolitan Transit System, where they looked at their safe track system with regard to the incident they had at the DuPont Circle Metro Station. I think somebody got killed there. And so you can, you know, that's a very local, relevant thing that really affects anybody who rides the Metro. So this is an example of website visits that we see at the NSC. So this is the Goddard website traffic. So two things stand out. Again, I could have put a trend line in there, but the trend is clearly going up, which tells me that Goddard is a consumer of information, which is a good thing. That's how we learn, without having to go through the bad experience ourselves. And we can also correlate it with our activities or our initiatives. So we ran a big eye safety campaign back in early of 2017, and we saw quite a large peak on that particular site where that link took you. So that was pretty cool for us to see. So here's another one, audits and assessments. Now when you see this, you're going to say this cannot possibly happen, okay? But it's true. So to me, audits and assessments are about finding problems, finding issues before they turn into big problems, right? That's kind of what compliance is all about. So this is my brother-in-law's garage. This is in northeastern Pennsylvania. And of course, when you see firemen and police sitting in front of your house, that's usually not a good thing, right? So what happened was they came home, my brother-in-law and his wife. They went into the house, heard a loud crashing sound, like what happened, right? Finally, they went out to the garage, and the garage floor had collapsed on both sides. And as you could see, the floor collapsed and it sucked both cars down, right? Now, clearly, if you'd have been standing there, you'd be dead. And if you weren't, you'd probably wish you were. And so when the structural engineer came out and did the assessment on this, there's a couple things. Is the house is built on a hill, so the garage is hanging over the hill. And from the outside, it looks just like foundation. And there was no ventilation inside of that space. So it was just like an enclosed false basement. So over the years, over 45 years, all of the water and the salt would drip off the cars. And of course, it eroded all the structural steel, right? And if you look at, you could see all the steel beams have been sheared all around. And like in this picture here, you could see all the, there was a metal pan where the concrete was poured, and all that had just basically disintegrated. It was just basically rust dust all inside there. And so I bring this up as a compliance thing because you would think that this would have just been backfilled with gravel, right? That's what everybody would assume, that this garage was just filled with gravel. So as it turns out, upon having the lawyers look at this, it turns out that this is actually another national situation where there are a lot of homes constructed like this in areas where there's a lot of hills. And the insurance companies know this, and the reason that my brother-in-law had a lot of problems with getting his claim denied was that this was considered a pre-existing condition. And the insurance companies are well aware of this, but they just don't know which houses and when and so on and so forth. So again, this is something to look for. If you live in a home that's made like this is something you might want to take a peek at. And then when the engineers came out and looked at, this house is built into a hill, and all the other houses when they opened up the walls, all the other houses have exactly the same situation. So now there's all this remediation going on. Of course, the builder's long gone and dead and so on. There's no recourse. So just a really tough situation that could have been a really bad day for somebody. So I'm sharing this with you so you could maybe take a look if this is your situation. So that leads to audits and assessments. And our audits and assessments group, we run all of the IFO, the QAR, and the RETA audits. And then we also administer the SARA system, which is where we keep track of all the corrective actions for our agency-wide audit findings. And one of the services that we provide is we put out annual reports, and in that report we'll do things like trending to see, okay, what are the top causes. And relevant to this theme, I pull this one out because systems, procedures, and training, a lot of that is people-oriented. A lot of it actually does tie back into fatigue, making bad choices, those kinds of things. So we can look at this information and kind of decide where's the best place to put some resources when we're trying to get our incident rates down. Goddard, I believe, had its last IFO audit in 2015, and they did very well. And I show this chart because Goddard is very good at having a high closure rate of its corrective actions. There's only 3 out of the 49 or 50 that were originally found that year. And that's a very low number. That's a very good number agency-wide. And Goddard is also to be commended as a standard for the rest of the agency in a lot of areas. These were identified as best practices, emergency management software, the confined space area website, the mobile response trailer, the software that you all use for your explosives inventory, and then a whole bunch of different accommodations. And I bring this up again because sharing this kind of information is important. And a lot of times we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just kind of look at somebody else and say, how'd you guys do that? And here's some really good examples of that. So this one is going to blow your mind because after even years later, it still blows my mind that this actually happened to me. This is my kitchen, and my daughter was little, and we were running around the kitchen playing chase. I was chasing her around that island there. And then as my lovely wife is demonstrating here, I paused for a moment and leaned up against the counter, and I had my ankle under the edge of the cabinet. And I went to chase my daughter. And in that instant, my ankle became entrapped under the edge of the cabinet. And of course, I went down 90 degrees to the floor, and I completely not only severed but shredded my Achilles tendon in my kitchen. And so what happened was, that's my leg after the surgery, and they had to open up my leg completely because it didn't just cut, it kind of shredded like spaghetti noodles kind of a thing. And so this is about 100 stitches internally. I have an artificial graft and about 40 stitches externally. And I love this, the doctor puts his initials are AD, Alan Davis, and it looks like a little USDA stamp on there. I thought that was kind of cool. All right, but that's my leg. This happened in my kitchen, of all places. I mean, in my kitchen, right? So if it can happen to me, it could happen to anybody. So this is me recuperating on the couch in my Darth Vader t-shirt. And needless to say, this was expensive. This was $75,000 worth of medical care. I was out of work for 3 weeks, and it was about a 6-month recovery. And even to this day, of course, my left calf never quite recovered. I'm walking around pretty good, but boy, that was a long haul to recover from that. And of course, I'm the safety guy, right? And I've had all kinds of interesting job titles over the years, yet somehow this still happens to me. So my ego is really hurt at this point. So where does that lead us? So we run our mishap investigation group, and we're in the business of providing mishap support for all of the agencies. So whenever the agency has, especially the high-profile mishaps, we'll usually send in an ex officio. We have mishap investigators regionally available to all the centers, and we provide mishap training. We've delivered thousands of hours worth of mishap training to several thousand investigators. So, you know, Goddard has, I forget what the number was, it's several hundred folks that have gone through all that training. So we have folks in the field at all the centers that are ready and able to support any mishap investigation that comes along, whether it's recovery, containment, and so on. We also run our NASA Mishap Information System. Does anybody here not know what NIMIS is? Is that a new term for anybody? Yeah. So the Mishap Information System that's the agency's reporting system for if we have an incident or a hazard that needs to be reported. You can go online, enter it in the NIMIS. It's anonymous, and the situation will get dealt with that way. And it's really our record-keeping system and where we log things and things like that. Now, the really cool thing is if you have a mobile device, then you can download an app. We call it a quick entry app for NIMIS. And so if you're walking along and you see a crack in the sidewalk, which would be a trip hazard for somebody, you can pull out your smartphone and enter it in. And, I would say chances are somebody's going to come and fix that crack in the sidewalk so they don't fall on it. So that's how it's used. And then we also have our dashboard app, which is a separate app, which allows you to actually trend all of the mishap data and statistics that are going on at your center, and then compare it to the agency. So those are really exciting things, and we're trying to get into the into the whole social media thing. And yes, sir. Don't get me started. Yeah, I know. Yes. Is this going to fall underneath that? It may. I don't know the answer to that question, and it's funny. Mike and I were just talking that I use my own smartphone, right? Because I don't like to carry two phones, and just recently I decided to go ahead and get a government phone. I was due for my update, and because I wasn't going to get it. And we all talked about it in work and said, yeah, we better just be prepared for that. At the pendulum swinging, this year, this is the season for IT security, and it may or may not swing all the way. I'm not sure, but you're good point. I don't have an answer for you on that one just yet. So we're all kind of waiting. So this is just a snapshot of some of the Goddard mishap and close call statistics. So what's wonderful is that the two bottom lines are pretty flat. Goddard has not had a type A mishap in quite a long time. I don't think there's even one on record here, and we've had a couple of type Bs, but not in many years. And despite having something like 40 or 50 flight projects in the hopper at any time, that's pretty darn impressive of Goddard. And we were just talking about this the other day about the trend line here. So yeah, the close calls that are reported in NIMIS, they seem to be going up, but we think it's indicative of more reporting, so more awareness. More people are using the interface and reporting these things, so this is just what we're observing. But I think this is all very positive. The other thing that occurred to us is that even though we have what is perceived as maybe a rise in close calls, the theory is that our systems and our controls are getting much more tolerant of when things do happen. They don't allow to unfold, and not everything turns into a disaster, at least to a much lesser extent. So that kind of wraps up this part of it. And if you want to get any more information about the NSC, you can certainly call me. I'd be happy to talk with you and answer any questions. But we have a website, the nsc.nasa.gov. Like I said, we're part of OSMA. If you go to the headquarters OSMA site, it'll also take you there. And we've got a help desk and a hotline and so on, and we can pretty much answer any of your questions. So if you're looking for audit data, mishap data, training information, anything of that sort, case studies, give us a shout. Anything else for that matter, too. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here now and talk a little bit about this idea of getting to zero injuries and incident rates. And this is always a controversial topic because it is so dang difficult to get those numbers down to zero. But I do have some thoughts to share with you that kind of lands clearly in total worker health camps, and just examine some ideas for what our role collectively is for our contribution to getting getting to zero. By the way, did anybody was anybody here for Rich Barney's talk during the Code 300 stand down? Okay, yeah, a couple, yeah. Yeah, that was a really good overview that he did. And as we go through this, I'll point out a couple things that Rich had done during his presentation that I found fascinating that kind of reinforce some of the things that I'm talking about here. So, interesting place to start is where do we stand? So these are the case rates. So this is OSHA reportable. What that means is that typically it's if somebody's lost work or they had to get hospitalized. That's how you end up on this chart. And the blue line is you here at Goddard, and you could see it's practically zero. It's like 0.1 cases per 100 employees. It's extremely low, and I would argue that being here at Goddard is probably one of the safest places on the planet when you look at it in terms of this, right? So if you back up a little bit, then the green line is you at NASA. So clearly Goddard is a trendsetter. You all have very few hospitalizations, very few medical treatments, and very few folks that are not able to come to work because of an injury. So this is just phenomenal. So NASA's a little worse, as you would expect, right? But it's still very low. NASA is lowest easily among industry, among similar organizations like nuclear reactors and things like that. Very, very low case rates. So the yellow line is you in industry, and so you can see things are starting to kind of get worse, right? And then this one, the red one, is you at home, right? So just casually glancing at this, right? It's two orders of magnitude more likely that you're going to get hurt at home. So I got to ask a kind of a general question. So who here got hurt? Who here got hurt at work or knows a coworker that got hurt at work in the last year? Anybody? All right. Now, who here in the last year has gotten hurt at home, or a family member has gotten hurt, where you had to go to the doctor or something like that? 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, right? So that's quite a few. That's quite a difference. We go from 0 to 4 out of a room of maybe 20 or so. So when I looked at this, when I looked at these numbers, it kind of raised, I was thinking about what am I going to talk about here, for total worker health, and this then just kind of jumped out at me, and it kind of prompted 3 questions. So the first question is why is it so low at NASA, right? And the answer to me is pretty simple, is that we have safety programs at NASA, right? We come to work every day, and we have a large employer who puts the resources, it has the resources and the motivation to keep us all safe and to keep its systems and its assets safe. And this is very different from when you leave here. There is no safety program, right? There's nobody at home having this conversation, right? We don't do that, right? So it's a very one-sided equation. So we have safety programs at NASA, and they're very comprehensive. And as I pointed out from going back to Apollo, they're over 50 years in the making. We've been at this for a very long time as an agency, taking our safety and our mission success very seriously. So then that asks another question then now, is why is it not 0 at NASA, right? It's so close to being 0, but why is it not 0? And the first thing is that we have a lot of gaps in our safety programs, right? So some simple examples might be, let's say that you witness a hazardous situation, right? So we have the NIMA system and other mechanisms to report it, but you don't report it. That's a gap, right? We have, let's say we have an audit finding that says, we need to take some corrective action in a facility, and the center decides, well, we don't want to do that because it's too much money, we're going to defer that maintenance. Well, and then if an accident happens, that's a gap, right? If you take a training class or you don't take a training class, right? If you let your skills get stagnant, that's a gap, right? Or if you take a training class and you learn some cool technique, some cool, analysis or engineering technique, but you don't put it into practice, that's a gap. So those are the kind of things that I think about. But then there's also your role in safety at work. And so this starts getting into that total worker health aspect and how it becomes very difficult to now separate what the individual does in the workplace and what the individual does at home, right? Because we're in the same physical body and we circulate from one place to another, right? That's the essence of having a job. And then the last question is, why is it so, high at home? Like, why is this, right? And the big thing is, like I said, we don't have any safety programs at home. So when I kind of put all this together, I think about this concept of taking safety that you learn at work and taking it home with you, right? Take those things that you learn here. Take just some of this conversation today. Maybe go home if you've got a house that's in question, that's built on a hill. Maybe take a look at it and make sure that your floor is not going to collapse. Maybe you'll think twice about running around your kitchen when you're chasing your child or your grandchild around, because bad things can happen. So how do we get to zero? So we know that we're up here somewhere, and it's not even, the number's not actually important, right? It's just that we know that it gets uncomfortable when we start seeing such high rates, especially as we kind of back out of the workplace and kind of morph back into our personal lives. And the way we do that is we have to drive it to zero. And I think we can certainly get close. And one of the first things we can do is fill in the safety gaps. And I say this because, to me, the idea is that if you come to work and you're whole and you're safe, then chances are you're going to have a safe outcome here at work if you're not fatigued, if you're not tired, if you're not stressed out, all those kinds of things. Likewise, when you go home and you do your yard work and your home improvement project, and you go and you participate in sporting events and things like that, chances are you're also going to not get hurt because you're whole, right? So that gets to what's your role at work and what's your role at home. So tying all these things together, I'm going to tell you this. We have such an opportunity here with the agency that we work for and the resources that they put into all of us, right? We're having a stand down here for a week, basically, talking about this stuff. And we have all these systems in place, right? Culture and mishap investigation and audits and all these awesome opportunities to catch things before they happen and to learn from it, to prevent them. So in this case, I'm going to say, take your work home with you. This is the one time I'll tell you to take your work home with you. Take what you learn here in the workplace and take it home and apply it. So question now is what's an example of that, right? So one of the things I think about is hazards. Hazards are the same at work and at home. So if you're running a lathe at work and you're concerned about your eyes don't care if your eyes are at work or if they're at home. So when you learn about eye safety at work, then when you get home, I can't tell you how many people I see, in my neighborhood, they're, run their weed eaters and stuff like that, no eye protection. And then they wonder why they end up in the hospital. Right? So your eyes don't care. They don't care whether you get hurt here or at home. Likewise, if you're standing on slippery surfaces, your feet don't care. Right? Friction is the same in both places. It doesn't matter if you're standing on the sidewalk at Goddard or if you're standing at the sidewalk in front of your house. Incidentally, this year, I'm up in Ohio. I was cleaning my driveway, and it was dark out, and I took a shortcut, and I did not put on my ice cleats when I went out to run my snowblower. So I cut a corner, and sure enough, I slipped, and before I know it, I'm laying on the driveway looking up at the stars. How did that happen? I hurt my elbow. It's still sore from taking that fall. And of course, as you get older, those falls don't feel as good as they used to. So another thing is ergonomics, right? Your wrists, your carpal tunnel, your back, your neck, your lumbar. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're sitting in a chair in your office in the cubicle or if you're sitting at home at the kitchen table or at your desk at work. It's all the same. Carpal tunnel is the same no matter what you do. So go get your ergonomic assessment. Take advantage of that and see if you could learn something and apply it to what you're doing at home. Take it with you. So I'm going to just kind of walk you through some simple things that we can do to take safety home. And this is just kind of maybe more observational type things that I've encountered over the years. But they're things that I've learned that kind of work for me. So one of the things is we need to resist unsafe messaging, right? We have to ignore what we hear in the outside world, right? Because it's an entirely different message set than what we get inside the gate. You know, shows like America's Funniest Videos, I don't find them humorous at all, right? I don't, you know, it's not a good idea to ski off the roof of your house, right? Because they don't tell you the part about when the person ends up in the hospital, right? So their motivation is you know, money, basically. You know, they're trying to get their viewership up, and that's how they get ratings and things like that, right? Another example is there's a Toyota Camry commercial, and so we all drive, right? So my point is here that we're all impressionable, all right? And Toyota Camry, it's a family-oriented car, very conservative vehicle, and if you've seen one of the most recent ad campaigns for the Toyota Camry, it's a 30-something male with a 5-year-old in the back, and he's driving the car in the parking lot doing donuts and smoking the tires, and right, and the little girl is in the back saying, "Go, Daddy, go!" Right? So, but then when you look at accident statistics, right, reckless driving makes up about 20% of all car fatalities, in which children happen to be one of the major unfortunate, you know, high raters in that type of situation. So we've got to kind of resist that negative messaging that we get. We would certainly never glorify, you know, NASA's not in the business of hey, you know, yeah, Charlie fell off the ladder. That's real funny, right? So we don't do that kind of a thing. So we get competing messages, and we're impressionable. And that's a gap, by the way. That's a gap in our safety. This is another one. So I've been at this in the safety business for a long time, and you know, I think about leadership. And I never quite knew what it meant when they say safety starts with leadership. I mean, I say that kind of loosely, but you know, I just never quite got it exactly. So in my house, every day is safety day, right? I live and breathe this stuff. I talk about it all the time. So I'm putting my daughter on the bus for kindergarten, and you know, I always sit whenever we break for the day, and I'm going to work, and I'll tell my daughter and my wife, "Be safe." Well, in this case, my daughter turned around and she said, "Be safe, Dad," you know, and like I got a tear in my eye, and I was like, wow, how did that happen, right? And so when I reflected on that phenomenon, and to this day, you know, she's 14 now, and she says, "Be safe." I came out here to Goddard on a trip, and she said, "Be safe, Dad." You know, she didn't say goodbye, she said, "Be safe." And so to me, that's leadership, and it's that consistency, that messaging, kind of that lighthouse, you know, the thing that you rely on. And you know, when we don't do that on a consistent basis, and when we don't encourage others, that's an example of a gap in our safety program. That kind of gets to our role in it, right? We have the system in place, but sometimes the system breaks down, and sometimes maybe we don't quite leverage it and contribute to it like we should. So this is very, very interesting for me. So here's another one, teaching others. So I have a lot of time on my hands. So when I'm driving, I like to do little experiments and collect data. So the question is, can I teach others without knowing them or personally interacting with them, never having talked to them? So one of the things that I do is, especially when I'm driving, right? Because I'm fanatical about safe driving. You know, I'm like Grandpa when I drive. But the question is, if I'm in car A and I come up to a stop sign, can I influence car B, the guy behind me, to use his turn signal? Right? And turn signals usage makes up about 30% of causes of car accidents. Certainly fender benders, right? So the question is, can I influence car B by something that I do? So what happens is, here's the experiment. So when I pull up to a stop sign, if I never use my turn signal, if the person behind me turns right, that person will usually use his turn signal 3 times out of 10 times that I turn right. Right? So if you think about it, we have, if everybody uses their turn signal in one pass through the intersection, we have 20 opportunities. I could use my turn signal 10 times, and the person behind me could use their turn signal 10 times. Now, if I pull up to the stop sign and I use my turn signal consistently 10 times, every time, I'll get about a 70% turn signal rate from the guy behind me. All right? So there's a lot going on there, but bottom line is I'm influencing that person behind me. So when you look at what's, you know, the goal here is to get everyone to use their turn signal, right? So this way we all know where we're going to go. And we're able to get this, you know, roughly 90% of the rate that's available to us, you know, just by that action. we now have a 6-fold increase in turn signal usage. I don't even know the guy. I've never seen him. I'll never see him again, but I influenced him, right? Likewise, I've done this in many different situations. Of course, if you don't use the turn signal, you're going to influence the person behind you to also not use their turn signal, because they'll say, oh, that guy's not using it, I'm not going to use it either. All right? So again, this kind of gets into your and our role in safety. So my daughter plays lacrosse. So if you know anything about girls lacrosse, they're not required to wear helmets, and that just drives me insane. So needless to say, my daughter wears a helmet. Now, the question is, this thing that I call courage. And it takes courage to get someone else to do something that maybe they're not aware of or that they don't want to do, right? So I call this the courage muscle. So even though my daughter is very safety-minded, she's not yet developed that courage muscle to tell her other teammates that they should also wear a helmet, right? So she gets it because I'm pushing her, right? And she wears her helmet without question. Another phenomena that my wife and I have noticed over the years is that when we start out the lacrosse season, there's usually 1 or 2 girls that are wearing a helmet, right? My daughter's one of them. Well, then every game in practice as the season goes on, we'll usually pick up 1 more girl wearing a helmet. So by the end of the season, there's 30 girls on the team, 15 of the girls are wearing helmets all of a sudden. And we see that consistently. Again, that's kind of how we imprint on each other and the influence we have. So of course, there's some parents on the side going, yeah, I guess we ought to get our helmet, huh? You know that that's what's happening. So I call that the courage muscle. Here's another one, leading by example, kind of related to that, but a little bit different. This one really gets into doing as I say, not as I do, and that whole phenomena. I can tell you my personal experience with that is very personal for me is when I was growing up, my parents were, multiple pack of cigarette a day smokers. And of course they would tell me, don't smoke. And my mom would be, don't smoke, And so my dad died of emphysema at a very young age. My grandmother died of lung cancer. A lot of family friends have died of lung cancer. My mom is stage 4 COPD, so she's not going to be around much longer either, all because of that kind of phenomena, do as I say, not as I do. And then, this picture here is kind of real. We see this all the time, right? Parents, they're concerned about their kids' safety maybe, but they don't do it themselves. They somehow feel above that fall, right? They don't quite resonate with what can happen in these kind of situations. So here's another thought. What works at work also works at home. So, and again, I'm trying to encourage you to kind of take safety home with you, right? Take that thought process home with you. So at work, we always talk about different types of goals, right? In safety, we want to get to 0 rates. We don't want to have any audit findings. We want to get our mishaps down and so on. So at work, we often keep track of, just like I've shown with some of these statistics, we like to keep track of how long we've gone without an incident. Well, I'd say kind of change that signage for yourself at home and put up a sign at home and say, okay, how long can I go without taking my kid to the ER? How long can I go without getting hurt when I'm cutting the grass? How long can I go without something happening to me? It's very interesting. A couple days ago, I went into my vanity drawer. And again, this is stupid. And I reached in to get something, and I cut myself, and I've got multiple cuts across my fingers, and I had an open razor blade in my drawer. And I was rustling through getting a tube of something, and I cut myself. It's like when I looked at it, it's like, you got to be kidding me! Like, what happened? So I didn't take my own medicine basically, and I got hurt. As minor as it was, but my fingers have been bleeding for the last few days. And, it's hard for me to type and everything. But these things affect us all. So here's another one: hack your health. So this is you're going to hear a lot about this kind of stuff this week. So when I think about hacking your health, I get it down to something very simple. So I'm kind of a gym rat. I work out a lot, but I don't play sports. And so people ask me, well, what are you working out for? Like, what do you do? And I say, well, I exercise to condition my body for the things that I actually do. So what do? So I'm a dad of a teenage daughter that's very active, and I'm a homeowner. I do home projects and things like that. So one of the things I condition myself for is to be able to pick up heavy stuff like those 50-pound cases of water, right? That's what I do. Every time I go to a lacrosse game, I'm the guy walking across the field with all the bottles of water, and I do that 4 or 5 days a week. So that so when I train, I pick up a medicine ball in the gym. Same like in the summer, I work out on a functional trainer, and I'll do raking exercises and digging exercises. During the winter, I do shoveling exercises. And as corny as that sounds, but it works. I generally don't get hurt doing those kind of things. And it's for that reason. So, here's a situation where, we have a new mother, right? So the right thing to do would probably be to kind of practice that lifting maneuver in a safe environment, with a little bit of resistance to kind of build up those muscles, and so that she doesn't drop her baby, or she doesn't throw out her back. Another one is hack your brain. Now, I'm not talking about neural hacking or neural genesis or any of that, neural electrostimulation, which are all very interesting things. I'm talking about basically getting a good night's sleep. And we have in our house, no electronic zone by the bed. And this stuff, I tell you, this stuff will fatigue you. You look at this at night and getting caught up on all your social media right before bed. The DVR box has the dreaded blue light in it that keeps you up at night. We cover that up. Even a lot of the alarm clocks, they're the wrong color. They're just, it's not the right thing going on. So really kind of think about what you're doing at night so you get a good night's sleep, so you don't come to work fatigued. Now this one is very interesting to me. So kind of a rule of thumb, again, thinking about what you learn here in the workplace about safety. So if you wouldn't think about doing it in the workplace, then don't even think about doing it at home. So a very simple example is, so I've been in this business for 30 years, and I know 3 people that have taken 2-story falls off of ladders, 3 NASA employees in my years, all in the last 15 years. So those are the ones that I'm personally aware of. And when I did the math on that, those 3 employees were out of work collectively for 24 months. So that's 2 years of work on the NASA plate that didn't get done or had to get done somewhere else. So just a tremendous impact. And the one situation was cleaning out a gutter. The one was taking care of a tree for an old lady neighbor, doing it as a favor. I mean, right? Those are just not good reasons to get yourself messed up. And I say messed up because, my one buddy, he walks like this now. He's got steel. He broke his back. He's got rods in his back. Now here at NASA, it's a little different, right? You have to have a permit. You don't typically get on a ladder without the buddy system. A lot of times at home, the issue is that you have the wrong size ladder, right? Here at NASA, or when you're in a workplace, you have your choice of ladders. You pick the right one for the job. At home, usually we just have one ladder and we try to make it work. Well, I'm going to stack it up on this chair, or I'm going to reach inappropriately, those kinds of things. Now this is something that Rich said in his presentation, and I think the video will be available for it. You guys will be able to take a look at that. But this idea of leave work better than you came, right? And to me, it's so easy. You can come to work, go for a 10-minute walk, right? You've left better than you came, right? If you're a smoker, maybe go pick up a brochure on the smoking cessation campaign. If you've got hypertension, go get screened. It doesn't cost anything. Take a walk to the health unit. All right, just very simple things that we can do to kind of get up on that curve, even if just to get exposed to some of the ideas for how we can maybe improve ourselves and make ourselves less likely to get hurt or contribute to an accident here in the workplace. And then I've got one more for you. This is my last chart. And I'm a technology nut, so I'm very much into it. I love cars that drive themselves. I have one. It's all a lot of cool stuff out there. But what I'm finding is that we often turn to technology as a solution for something that maybe doesn't need the technology. And then it has unintended consequences. We have to deal with it, right? So this is the road to my daughter's school in the morning. And my daughter took this picture from me a couple weeks ago. And so the road situation is this. It's a dark road. There's no street lights. It's pitch black. And then right before the entrance of the school, which is about a couple hundred feet up above, so this is a sign. And it's a school zone speed limit sign. And it was made with the bright white LEDs. All right, so here you're on a black road, and now you're driving, and it looks exactly like this. You can't read it. It's just like this, oh, the sun, you know. And so then what happens is when you drive by it, now you've had this blinding light that you couldn't even see what the sign said, and now guess what? Your night vision's messed up. All right, so now I'm pulling into the school, which has this one little light in here, and now my night vision is messed up. What's in and around the school zone? Kids, right? Dressed in dark clothes that I can't see because I just had my night vision blinded. So when I see stuff like this, you know, I think, you know, this could be a $20, you know, reflective sign that requires no maintenance that's going to last for 30 years. But instead, it's, you know, this $10,000 contraption that's going to break in 5 years, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. But it has safety consequences. You know, the very thing that it was put in place for is not doing its job. And on the surface, it sounds like a great idea, but in practice, it doesn't work out. So I'm going to leave you with this kind of analogy, I guess. You know, I do think we can get to zero incidents. And, you know, I kind of like these metaphors. And I think, you know, we've got over 50 years of safety experience under our belt at this point. So we've got a lot of road behind us. But I also think we have a lot of road ahead of us and a lot of opportunity to make things better. And not just here, right? To me, that's the Holy Grail is to be safe and have safe practices in our personal lives. So we're not constantly, you know, trying to balance doctor trips and emergency room visits and all this other stuff that we don't really have to do, right? There's nothing here that I've talked about today, especially some of these bad accidents that I've personally experienced that weren't preventable, right? They were all preventable. So I heard this saying a while back that when you're on the road less traveled, there's not a lot of traffic on it. And I think that's very true. So I think we're going to continue to be the leadership in a lot of these areas. And I think total worker health and injury incident-free workplace, those are two concepts that we're going to see a lot of in the next decade. It's going to be something that's going to really take off for us. So how do we get to zero incidents? I think we need to fill in our safety gaps for the systems that we have, right? So when you see a hazardous situation, report it, right? Don't discourage someone from speaking up at a meeting. Those kinds of things. Those are gaps. Those are all examples. And then examine your role in safety at work and your role in safety at home, and just kind of think about that every day. And take your safety work home with you. This is a gift that we can even have this conversation. So that's all I have. And are there any questions that I can answer? Yes, sir.
Yes, so regarding a safety gap, so I'm on an agency committee that deals with design and construction. So we recently had the facilities BSA.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're rewriting some of our NPRs and so forth. And so I got a call from some guy from Kennedy in the safety group. And so he's asking, and I think we're pursuing, taking these separate safety documents, I don't know which numbers they are,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, instead of making them this standalone thing that gets side referenced, taking that and incorporating it into the facilities, NPRs, and so
Oh,
forth,
yeah.
distributing the safety stuff
Mm-hmm.
into the specific things that it's meant to protect or help.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something you're working with or not, but that seems to be one of those.
Yeah, not me personally, but that's a good example of filling in those gaps. It's a good example. Anybody else? Well, I appreciate your all's time. And if you got any questions, give me a shout. Reach out to our help desk. Talk to Mike in the back there or out at the Safety Center booth. So be safe out there. Don't get hurt.